Hari Jaya. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Vishnu Paramahansa Swavaraja Gacharya Sadasi Svadesi Bhakti Swami Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopita Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai, Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadabdhan Ki Jai, Ganga Jamuna Tulasi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Samavetta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Go Premanandi, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschachadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasani Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. In our philosophy we discuss about the Supreme Lord. We have a Supreme Lord, and one of his qualities is he has Shakti, or energies. And he has three basic energies: the internal energy or spiritual energy, which manifests the spiritual universe. And he has another energy, which is the opposite. It's called Bahiranga Shakti, or external energy. And that manifests the material universe. So we got two energies manifesting two different worlds. And then we got a third energy called the Tatastha Shakti, which manifests the jivas. That's us, little elements of consciousness who are something like the Lord, but we can shift from one universe to the other, from the material to the spiritual, spiritual material. We can go both ways. So we're called Tatastha for that reason. So anyway, if we're in ignorance and we're sitting in this material world as jivas, we don't know anything about the other universe, the spiritual world. We only know about this world. But this world, as we say, it's made of Shakti. It's the Lord's energy. And it's the energy means it's something which is controlled by the Lord, and it's able to carry out certain functions as if independent, but not actually. And it can do that in a very organized way also. So it acts very intelligently almost, but it's actually under the Supreme Lord. So the Lord can do remarkable things with these different energies. So we have the material world, and of course the animals and the plants. They don't think too much about this universe and where they are in it. They're basically involved with survival in the material world. But the human being is an intelligent animal. And Prabhupada mentions in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita that the propensity of the human being is that he has intelligence, so he can ask questions that animals cannot ask. So of course animals do ask questions. Where's my food? Where's my house? So these are the questions that they ask, survival questions basically. Human being also can ask those questions, and he does. And he does a lot of activity for that. But then he can also ask other questions due to his self-awareness. He's aware that he exists. And the animals really aren't aware of that. So then he can ask, well, who am I? What is this world I'm living in? What is my goal in life? What is matter? Who are we? Etc. So he can get a little bit introspective and philosophical, and also ask about the reality of this world. And of course, out of that we get all sorts of religions and philosophy. So we have many philosophies that ask, what is this world, etc., and they examine it. And we also get science out of this. What is matter? And then they start analyzing it. So this is the propensity of the human being. And of course, we go in the other direction also, and we can start, let's say, praising it in certain ways, because it is very mysterious, it's very beautiful, etc. So therefore we get art and music and poetry, which the animals also don't have. So in this way, the human being is quite distinct from the animals because he can ask all these questions. So what is the world? That's one of the questions. Of course, it is also linked with what am I, or who am I, but sometimes people don't really consider the two questions related at all. So that's the material world with a very gross conception of things. Everything is matter, even I'm matter, so we'll just analyze everything in terms of matter. So that is what the gross materialist does. And he struggles to analyze the world in terms of material elements and physical forces. In other words, this is what science does. So one way of doing it is analyzing it. This is nothing new. In the tradition of the Vedas, there were some philosophers also who started analyzing in the same way. These are called the Vaisheshika philosophers. So they had an idea, everything is basically atoms, little particles. Even in Bhagavatam we find big particles and smallest particles like this, analyzing things. So it's nothing new. So science also does the same things, and then they analyze everything to little small particles. And then we get the smallest particle is the atoms. And there's different types of atoms, so we get elements. And then elements combine together, and they make compounds of different sorts. But even that smallest particle, generally they thought it was little balls or something like that. And then they began to understand that no, it's not balls, it's actually charges. There's positive and negative charges somewhere in there. In other words, it's electrical energy of some sort. It's not just something like that, it's actually energetic. And we have positive force and negative force. We have, the electrons and the protons, etc. Combining together, and they're also, this is not static, it's always moving. And most of it is space also. Right? So after analyzing things in little particles, then they found that it wasn't little particles at all, it was actually mostly space. And then charges, energy, it was all energy. And then when they found further, when they in the 20th century, then they started going further. They developed more sophisticated instruments, more sophisticated mathematics, and more genius in the form of Einstein and others. And then they discovered it's not little atoms with electrical particle here and a proton here and a neutron here. It wasn't like that either. It was quite different. The electrons weren't kind of located anywhere. They were just kind of in a big, it wasn't moving around like this, it was in a probability field, more or less, they call it. And things weren't like, they weren't, you couldn't locate an electron here, here, here. It could be everywhere, kind of. So a whole new type of perception came about with quantum physics and whatever. And not only that, they've developed, based on this new physics, quite surprising types of phenomena or theories. For instance, that any movement of one particle in the universe can affect something on the other side of the universe. Or if the butterfly flaps its wing here, it will have an effect 5,000 miles away somewhere else. So everything is linked with everything else in the universe somehow or other. Very strange concept, but this looks mystical, but that's what science has concluded. There's relationships across the universe of things that may not look like related to us. So that's a concept that's come out of science. And furthermore, the real interesting thing is that consciousness cannot be separated from matter. As I explained the other day, in quantum physics, the observer is essential to creating the reality. If you want to see a particle, you can see a particle and measure it as a particle. If you see the photon as a wave, it becomes a wave. So what is real depends upon the consciousness of the observer and his intention. So in other words, reality is entwined with the observer or the consciousness of a being, which is, it sounds very strange because science does not want to admit consciousness as anything real. The only matter is real. But now we said that reality depends upon the consciousness of the observer. Very strange. So there's this kind of theory has developed in the modern world, and it's difficult to explain it unless we also bring into play not only matter but the Atma or the Jiva, the conscious being. So the Vedic version of the universe is quite different from the material analysis according to modern science. There is some similarity because in the Vedas we also analyze things, but we also have some subtle things which don't exist in science as of yet. Of course, at the top of matter in the Vedic version we have very subtle parts of Maya like time and karma and action, the ability to act and create results. So these are some principles inherent within the material world, but they're not matter as such. And time is a very mysterious factor, which even science cannot really define. They use it in their equations like E equals mc squared, but they can't really define what time is. They don't know what it is, even the most brilliant scientists. So the Bhagavatam also understands, yes, time is there. It's a factor in the material world, a very subtle factor that disturbs everything. It's called Kshobhaka, the agitator. Time is the agitator of Prakriti, and it gets Prakriti to move and start transforming. And then we have karma, which is a moral principle for human beings. So that's inbuilt into the whole universe within matter itself. We can say along with matter, this principle of karma. that if you do sinful activities, you get suffering. If you do pious activities, you get enjoyment. So that's a very subtle principle built into matter itself, which is very difficult for modern science to understand. And then we got the gross matter, which is very subtle Prakriti that you cannot see. Nobody can see that. And then we get its grosser manifestations, Mahatattva, Ahankara, mind, senses, sense objects, etc. And even the gross matter, ether, air, fire, water, earth, they're invisible to us. They have to combine, that makes objects we can see. So the world is a little more subtle than we think it is in terms of elements. Nevertheless, it's divided up into elements also, but we have they're all subtle, and then we got the gross subtle elements and the subtle elements and the very subtle elements, until we get Prakriti at the very top, which is called avyakta, which means not manifest. Nobody can see it at all. So we got matter admitted, and it's real. It's not illusory. It's real. But it's not independent. We have Krishna, and from him we have the expansion Mahavishnu, and it is Mahavishnu that ultimately decides when Prakriti will manifest into matter and universe as we know it. He injects the atom into the Prakriti, and then Kala, time, begins to operate, and the karmas get stuck to the jiva, and then Prakriti evolves into universes. So that's the universe as we know it. Okay, anyway. So, and of course we also have the gunas. Originally, no guna is manifest in Prakriti. It's there, but it's not manifest. And when Mahavishnu glances and puts a jiva in there, then Prakriti manifests a sattvic state called Mahatattva. Very, very fine. And with the jivas glowing within it. It's so fine that the jivas can manifest their energy within that, and it's described as being a ball of light, not because of fire, but because of the consciousness of the jivas. Then it starts, because it's Prakriti, it starts changing at that point. And then it turns into a rajasic form called sutra, then into a tamasic form called ahankara, which you're all familiar with, false ego. And then false ego divides up into a sattvic portion called Gyan Shakti, a rajasic portion called Kriya Shakti, and a tamasic part called Dravya Shakti, which turn into mind and devatas from the sattvic portion, intelligence and knowledge gathering senses from the rajasic portion, and the sense objects and the elements from the tamasic section. So all very orderly, everything comes out of this universe manifested by the Supreme Lord. And these things are also all invisible, but they're called elements. So the ear is an element, the tongue is an element, the nose is an element. So in other words, inherent in this material world are the instruments to perceive things, etc. But they can't do anything, obviously, unless we have a jiva stuck in there. And then the jiva gets his senses, etc., and then he can see the elements. So with the nose he can detect the earth, with the tongue he can detect water, with the eye he can detect the fire or light, skin he can detect the air, and with the ear he can detect sound. So, and then behind that there is devatas, who are responsible for helping us perceive things in this world. So all this is part of material world. But then the Vedas say that's not the only thing. There's something very important there. More important than the matter is the Atma, the jivas. Innumerable jivas are injected by the Lord into the material world. Without them, material world cannot function. Nothing happens. So when the Lord injects the jivas into the material world, then Prakriti begins to manifest into Mahatattva and Ahankara, etc., and make all the things. So the jiva is an important part of the material world. It's not just some matter. So the jiva is integral for the existence of this universe. So just as we said that the reality of the universe is dependent on the consciousness in quantum physics, that's very so.
Without the jiva, nothing it's all useless. Right? And so it is this Atma, or the jiva, who is the conscious particle with a sense of I, and I perceive that. I'm going to perceive that. I'm going to test that particle as a particle, not a wave. That's that sense of I is doing that. Right? And then he does the test as a doer, and then he gets the result. He says, oh, it's a particle, or it's a wave. So that's what the jiva does. But besides that, we have the Supreme Lord, who actually is outside the universe, because as Mahavishnu, he's glancing and he's injecting jivas into Prakriti, so he's outside. But miraculously, he's also inside. So he expands himself into each universe as Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and he expands himself further into each jiva as Paramatma, the Kshirodaksha Vishnu. So in other words, the Lord pervades everything in the material world, from the subtle aspect of Prakriti down to the jiva within the material world. And that Supreme Lord is completely independent, and he has many forms, but he's only one, whereas the jivas are many. So he's the supreme controller, the supreme doer. Whatever the jiva can do is because the Lord permits him to do it. Whatever the jiva knows is because the Lord gives him the consciousness to do it. Whatever experience he has is because of the Lord's blessings. So the Lord ultimately bestows certain abilities on the jiva, and he's independent to do so. So therefore we got the material world is much more complicated than modern science would lead us to believe. They are discussing the gross matter, combination of elements, and even that is more subtle, as we see, than modern analysis gives us. Then we have the subtle matter, the mind, the ego, or ahankara, intellect, pure elements, etc., sense objects, all of that. But beyond that we get the spiritual element, the jivas, infinite number of jivas, and then we get Supreme Lord, who regulates the whole system. So the material world cannot exist without all of this, and particularly without the Supreme Lord and the jivas. So that part is completely missing from modern science when we look at it. So in other words, everything is organized by the Supreme Lord. So the Supreme Lord has all knowledge, and he does things with a certain plan. So therefore, the whole manifestation of this world is quite regulated by the Lord. He doesn't make some haphazard, faulty, useless thing. He makes something which is perfectly organized according to his intentions. But we may not understand that. And particularly if we're only looking at the matter part, we're not even seeing the jiva part of it, very difficult for us to understand there is a purpose at all. So that is what the Vedas tell us, particularly Upanishads. So they express this very poetically. Out of fear of the Lord, the wind blows. Out of fear, the sun rises. Out of fear of the Lord, Agni and Chandra function. Out of fear, the fifth one, death, flees. So ultimately, everything's under the control of the Supreme Lord, though it may look indirect. But ultimately, the Lord is behind everything within this world. There's nothing superior to me, O conqueror of wealth. Everything is in me as pearls are strung on a thread. So everything is dependent upon the Supreme Lord, though it may not look like it to many people. But we see even Einstein and his things. It looks like there's something behind this whole creation and all the laws of material nature. It's not random. So therefore he says, I cannot say there is no God. I can be an agnostic, but I cannot say there's no God. So we appreciated that. And as everything, the Lord permeates everything in the material world, as it says in Bhagavad Gita, I am the taste of water, I am the light of the sun and moon, I am Pranava, that's the Omkar in the Vedas, sound in ether, and successful efforts of men. So all the elements and all the actions in the world are pervaded by the Supreme Lord. Whatever object in past, present, or future displays majesty, beauty, or strength, know that it has arisen from just a fragment of my power. We know that the universe looks very big to us. It's 21 with 20, no, I don't know, 1 times 21 zeros. That's one universe, according to science, is that big, but there's billions of those universes. According to modern science, maybe there's more than that, but this is nothing. It's a little fragment. It's only the external energy of the Lord. One small ray of the Lord's energy in that whole material creation that Mahavishnu carries out. So, as I said, the jiva and the material, when it becomes a human being, then he can ask, what is this world? How does it work? And what am I supposed to do, etc. Yeah. So if we have this idea that there is a Supreme Lord and the jivas are here, placed by the Lord with specific purposes, etc., and we understand what the purpose is, then we know the plan of the Lord, then we can live nicely in this world. If we don't understand, we create problems for ourselves and problems for the whole world. So we have the humans there, and we have to understand that Supreme Lord is a director, and he is the person who's controlling all the resources, etc., and matter and whatever, and the other life forms, etc. So they're all everything is related in this material world, because we do have material bodies and everything is material, but it's under the Supreme Lord ultimately. And that is stated by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. All creatures arise from food, food arises from rain, rain arises from sacrifice, sacrifice arises from prescribed actions, which means the duties, and the duties arise from the Vedas, Vedas arise from the Lord. Therefore, this all-pervading Lord is eternally situated in sacrifice. So, we see that there's a cycle here going on in the material world, and the Lord is involved in that cycle by giving injunctions to the Vedas to do sacrifice. If we don't do that, the cycle is interrupted. So that's a very basic principle in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Vedic literature. Somehow, sacrifice, which means worship of the Lord or recognition of the Lord, has to be there. Otherwise, the cycle is not complete. If the cycle's not complete, you don't get your rain, you don't get your food, and the people die. Everything dies. So this is for the human being. Animals don't do sacrifice. Human being has to do the sacrifice. He has the intelligence. So he has to connect with the Supreme Lord and understand that the Lord is behind everything. Follow his orders. He does properly, then he does yajna, rain comes, food comes, body is supported, then he can do more of that, worship the Lord again. So, in this way, if we recognize the Lord and the laws that the Lord has established and follow them properly, then we can be successful in this world. In other words, we can get our maintenance. And if we don't follow, then we don't get anything. He who does not follow the cycle initiated in this way by the Lord, but instead leads a life of sin, enjoying with his senses, lives in vain. So one who follows the Lord's prescribed duties and does the sacrifice, he does not lead a life of sin. Of course, he uses his senses and enjoys, but it's within the Vedic prescription, so therefore it's not sin. And therefore, the cycle operates. But when we break that and we enjoy independently of Vedic rules, then we interrupt the cycle and we get a lot of problems like that. This is also represented in the Upanishad. This visible world or whatever exists beyond perception is under the control of the Lord. Because of this, you should enjoy only what is allotted to you by the Lord through karma. Do not hanker more than that. Whose property is it? Okay? So we have to understand there is a controller and owner of everything. And if we take something, then obviously we're taking something and we don't ask for it, we don't get permission, then we're a thief. Then we get punished. So if we don't cooperate with that law, then we end up with a lot of problems. So that non-cooperation, of course, is represented by many of our lower instincts, like lust and anger, arising from the mode of rajas. Know this to be the great devourer, the great sinful one, the enemy. Therefore, in the beginning, regulating the senses by Nishkama Karma Yoga, O best of the Bharat lineage, kill this demon which destroys scriptural knowledge and realization of Atma. So in other words, we should follow scripture to control the senses, and once we do that, then we make the cycle proper again. If we don't follow, we end up with a lot of problems. So not only individual problems, we get global problems, and that we see in the modern world. Not only in the modern world, we saw it in the ancient world. Why did the Devatas complain to Lord Brahma about Kamsa? Because he was disturbing the whole system, persecuting the Brahmanas, not letting them do their sacrifices. Same with King Vena. He just haphazardly did things and all sorts of sinful activities, so they had to kill him. This happens, and then we see the example of Ravana. What did he do? He wanted to say, let's not do pious activities. Let's go to Svargaloka by building a big tower, a big ladder, and climbing up to Svargaloka on a ladder instead. So, when we ignore the rules given by the Lord, then we create problems for everybody, not only ourselves. We get global effects. Right? We can see that in the modern world as well. This is explained in the Bhagavatam, in the section we're coming up to very soon. There is the personification of Kali Yuga appearing, and he is beating at the legs of the bull, which is Dharma, and the cow is weeping. So the cow is the earth. So if there is no Dharma, or very little Dharma, then the earth suffers. So we get something like that. Nothing, earth will not give anything if the prescribed duties and Dharma is not maintained properly, and we end up with greed and sinful activities and lust, etc., uncontrolled senses. Then earth does not prosper anymore. Earth will not give its yield. Just like the cow. The earth is represented by the cow. The cow is an apt symbol, because what does the cow do? The cow gives milk for our nourishment. So the earth gives food and minerals and water and air for our nourishment. But if the cow is upset, the cow will not give any milk. Similarly, if the earth is upset, it will not give its produce. It will not give us water and air and minerals and food. And what upsets the earth is the lack of the human being not following the rules of Dharma and doing the sinful activities. So in this way, the witch is represented by personification of Kali. So consequently, if we have unbridled sinful activities, uncontrolled senses operating, then we will end up with a very suffering world, a problematic world. Everything becomes a cause of suffering. So not only the whole earth, but even our body is a very delicately balanced instrument. The earth, of course, I explained in another projection that the earth also has its own particular vibrations. That's called the Schumann resonance. It goes at 7.6 hertz, a very regular vibration which corresponds to our own alpha state, and also with the, let's say, the plants and the animals. That's the natural state of vibration for the earth and all the living entities there. And our body itself is a little bit of also a generator. It generates electricity. And if your electricity is not going properly in your body, then you're unhealthy. You get sick. So it's electricity that goes through your nervous systems and signals to the brain. And it's all electrical charges. It goes from cell to cell to cell to cell. This is how the messages are transmitted by electrical current. It's a very complicated system. And actually they say it's so complicated and so far out that who could invent such a system? It is so complicated but so ingenious, the way that all the little signals are going back and forth. In 1 second, the little impulses are going up to your brain, and there's a counter response, etc. It's all little electrical signals going from cell to cell to cell. And so this controls all your functions, your heartbeat, etc. How you breathe oxygen, movement of the blood, digestion, it's all going through these little signals, little electrical signals. Millions and millions of them happening all the time. So the scientists compare our body to a little micro-electrical generator. It's got its own source of power even. It doesn't. You don't have to plug us in to do anything. We just operate automatically, but we do need, food, water, air, etc. But then we generate our own little power system and the electrical currents. So body is very, very complex, and it has its own energy systems within it, which are very delicate also. When we look at the human body, especially the nervous system, we should conclude that the human body has an innate knowledge of harnessing electric energy to change it into other forms of energy. When we consider the scale of the operation at the atomic and microscopic level, because it's happening all the time in all parts of our body, we can only wonder at God's profound wisdom in the creation. It's such a complex thing that's happening all the time, day in and day out, for your whole life, all these little currents going through your body. So it's a very well planned out, organized system with electrical currents going through it. And if you don't have the right voltage and stuff going through, then you get sick. There was one scientist that was doing operations, but then he ended up getting the same disease as one of his patients, some brain something or other infection, and nobody could cure it. It was incurable. And then he could only think for 3 hours a day. The rest of the time his mind was blank because his whole brain got messed up like this. Nobody knew what to do. So then he began to study a little bit, and then he figured out that his voltage was too low. So he found a means of increasing the voltage of all the cells in his brain and whatever, and then he could think properly again. So he had to increase the voltage somehow or other. So if you don't have that voltage to run your cells, everything starts breaking down. So the energy system is very, very sensitive. Now we can upset that whole system with our electrical fields. So as modern human beings, we have created all sorts of artificial fields which are not the natural field of the the Earth at 7.6 hertz. They're much quicker fields, of energy. The big ones, of course, are very harmful, and everybody knows that. But then we have what we call the radio frequencies, which we say, okay, those are safe. We think they're safe, at least. But they're actually doing something to our system and disturbing our system also, because I said it's a very, very delicate system of electrical currents going through your nervous system and through your cells, etc. So obviously they do have, these low frequency electric fields do have an influence on our body. Low frequency magnetic fields induce circulating currents within the human body. The strength of these currents depend on the intensity of the outside magnetic field. If sufficiently large, these currents cause stimulation of nerves and muscles or affect other biological processes. So in other words, they upset the balance of everything by these other electrical currents, etc. in the body. So, of course, World Health Organization has said, despite extensive research to date, there's no evidence to conclude that exposure to low-level electromagnetic fields is harmful to human health. Okay, so let's face for this, so we can build our electrical towers and our cell phones and all this. It's safe, because the World Health Organization says so, and they'll quote all the scientists that say that. But then we find other scientists say, no, there's something wrong. Repeated Wi-Fi studies show that Wi-Fi causes oxidative stress, sperm testicular damage, neuropsychiatric effects including EEG changes, apoptosis, whatever that is, ptosis, cellular DNA damage, endocrine changes, and calcium overload. So it's causing some effects that are not very welcome for people. And that's coming from science. Cell phones and wireless expose people to a type of microwave radiation, also known as radio frequency radiation, or RF, EMF. Peer-reviewed research has demonstrated a myriad of adverse biological effects from wireless radiation, including reproductive dysfunction, single and double-stranded DNA breaks. If the DNA breaks, this causes a lot of sickness. Creation of reactive oxygen species, immune dysfunction, that means you cannot recover when you get sick. Stress protein synthesis in the brain, that's probably cortisol or something. Altered brain development, something happens in their brain and it starts making tumors probably. Sleep and memory disturbances and increased brain tumors. So that's what some people are saying, whereas the World Health Organization says, very safe, but this counter evidence from other scientists. And then we come to 5G, which is more extreme. The waves are more extreme. More than 240 scientists published an appeal to the United Nations to reduce public exposure, are calling for a moratorium on 5G, citing established adverse biological effects of RF radiation, that's the radio frequency. Scientific data on the biological effects of radio frequency indicate the immediate need for a cautionary approach to protect the public. The research has accumulated enough to provide strong evidence that even low levels are not safe. We'll just speak of high levels when you get to the 5G. What is 5G? It's called fifth generation of cellular networks. It is expected to be one of the fastest wireless technologies ever created, which means you can download things quicker on the internet. That's the basic idea. One of the things you could do with it. Of course, the faster communications of anything, of data, of anything, all over the world. So that's the advantage of it, faster communication and transmission of data in huge amounts. 5G is widely believed to be smarter, faster, and more efficient than 4G. It promises mobile data speeds that far outstrip the fastest home broadband network currently available to consumers, with speeds of up to 100 gigabytes per second. 5G is set to be as much as 100 times faster than 4G. So, to do the 5G, of course, it's, as I said, it's faster, but it's also more intense. Those waves are much stronger than the 4G or the 3G or the 2G. Plus, they go shorter distance, so you need more towers. So you need a lot of towers, mini towers. You have one big tower, then you have all these little towers all over the city. Every 5 houses or something stuck on the lamppost, you need another thing. So in other words, the source of the energy is getting closer and closer to the people, not some distant tower on a mountain, but it's right next to your house, which can cause more damage. 4G networks use frequencies below 6 gigahertz, but 5G uses extremely high frequencies at 30 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz range. So it's quite a bit stronger. 5G also uses shorter wavelengths, which means the antennas can be much smaller than existing antennas while still providing precise directional control. So very, very strong. So the Scientific American, which is a respectable magazine, it's not a a conspiracy theory magazine or anything like that. The latest cellular technology, 5G, will employ millimeter waves for the first time, in addition to microwaves that are being in use for older cellular technologies, 2G through 4G. Given limited reach, 5G will require cell antennas every 100 to 200 meters, every 5 houses or so, exposing many people to millimeter wave radiation. Millimeter waves are mostly absorbed within a few millimeters of the human skin and in the surface layers of the cornea, that's your eye. Short-term exposure can have adverse psychological effects in the peripheral nervous system, immune system, and cardiovascular system. So this is Scientific American saying, not good. It can affect your health. Your eyes, your immune system, your nervous system, your heart. This appeared in I think it's some Thai medical journal. We have considerable evidence about the harmful effects of 2G and 3G. Little is known about the effects of exposure to 4G, a 10-year-old technology, because governments have been remiss to funding this research. So they haven't even researched the effects of 4G, only 2G and 3G, and now that's bad already. So they didn't do anything about 4G. Meanwhile, we're seeing increases in certain types of head and neck tumors in tumor registries, which may be at least partially attributable to the proliferation of cell phone radiation. So even the 2G and 3G looks like it's influencing to give people tumors in their head. So after 15 minutes, your head starts heating up. If you speak on a phone for 15 minutes, your brain's getting fried out. Instead, we should support the recommendations of the 250 scientists and medical doctors who signed the 5G appeal that calls for an immediate moratorium on the deployment of 5G and demand our government fund the research needed to adopt biologically based exposure limits that protect our health and safety. So there is some, agitation about 5G, and of course some people say, oh, it's all, conspiracy theory, but there are serious scientists also protesting this whole thing. It is without doubt that 5G affects the Schumann resonance of, this is 7.83 hertz, and this is gigahertz that they're doing now. So it's quite different. It annihilates that 7.83 hertz, which is the Earth vibration, so it destroys that. That's because the 5G resonance is between LET frequency range 600 megahertz and 6 gigahertz, and a millimeter wave bands of 24 to 86 gigahertz. Wireless radiation and the megahertz and gigahertz is literally millions and billions of times the normal frequency of the Earth. So that's how unnatural it is. Within the RF portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, the higher the frequency, the more dangerous it is for all living organisms. So now we got this very high frequency, which is very dangerous because it's not natural at all. And as I said, the human organism is made up of little, very delicate electrical circuits and nervous things going on in your body like this, and you get all these other things coming in. They're going to disturb it. In humans, we have clear evidence of cancer now. There is no question. We have evidence of DNA damage, cardiomyopathy, which is the precursor of congestive heart failure, neuropsychiatric effects. 5G is an untested application of a technology that we know is harmful. So they know that the 2G and 3G is harmful already, but 4G, 5G, they haven't done anything yet. They're spreading it around the world. In academics, this is called human subjects research. So I thought, what is human subjects research? So I looked it up on the internet. So it says you use human beings for your experiments without telling them what it is. That's what you do. And later on, 20 years later, you say, oh, yeah, now we know that you're getting cancer or whatever, but it was only an experiment. We had to go 20 years in experimenting to figure it out. There's a famous example of this in America. They did experiments on the blacks in the southern part of North America, in the USA. This is called the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. So they wanted to observe how syphilis acted on people over long periods of time, and then they would. So they got the blacks in southern USA, and they signed them all up and gave them a little reward. Okay, we'll help you, recover and everything, but we want to, examine you and see how the drugs are affecting you, etc. But they didn't have drugs at that time really to effectively counteract syphilis, but they had all these people there. I think it was probably 500 or 600 candidates were there, and they would take the blood tests and whatever like this, whatever. But then in 1942, they actually discovered penicillin worked very good. But they never gave it to these people because they wanted to carry out their experiment and see how long they would last with their syphilis disease and what would the effect of syphilis on their brain and their nervous system over many, many years. So it went on until 1972, and they didn't give them any medicine. They just let it go on as an experiment, and they were justifying it. And then somebody discovered it in 1962. They discovered it, and they started writing to the newspaper. Finally, it came out in the New York Times or something, and then they made a whole court case, and they stopped it finally in 1972. But even to then, the people were, it's done by university actually, and they were justifying. We have to see the results. Don't interrupt the experiment. And they never told the people at all, and they never gave them the drugs because they wanted to carry on their experiment. So that's an example of human, what do they call it? Human subjects research. You do things without telling them what's actually happening and why you're doing it, and like that says for your benefit. So that's basically, what they're doing now. They're experimenting with the human race actually by putting up these towers everywhere, and they don't know the effect. And later on they'll see the effect and say, oh, it's damaging, then they'll stop maybe. So anyway, that's 5G. So, as I said, the human body actually is very subtle, and it's got all these electrical currents. If we go on the more subtle level, this is not so much science because we don't. Of course, they do have what is called the instruments now to detect your aura, so to speak. So we have these auras, subtle energy coming out of your body, and they can be detected by certain machines nowadays. So that's of course what we call the aspects of the subtle body, which are detectable because they're also material energy, so they're somewhat detectable. So we can say that the human energy is detectable in that subtle body, and obviously if the electrical currents got disturbed by all of these cell phones and 5G, then the subtle body is going to get very affected because it's all made out of very subtle energy also. And that system actually is a very complex system, just like the material body is a system with all organs in it and things like that. So the subtle body is actually a system. We have the chakras in the body, not just the major 7 chakras, we got all minor chakras all over your body as well, energy centers. Then we get layers of your subtle body at different levels, frequencies of vibration, finer and finer and finer and finer, from the lowest one to the highest one on the outside. And they all deal with different levels of consciousness. So if we have all these foreign electrical currents coming in, they're really going to disturb all your levels of your body, which will affect your physical health, like the pranic level, and they'll affect your emotional level and your mental level and the spiritual level. All things get affected by these currents. So as I said, the Earth is a body, and the 5G is really all these things, all the electrical things they're experimenting with now are causing a problem with the Earth and its magnetic fields and its Schumann resonance, etc. What to speak of our human body? Same thing happening to our body, getting all disturbed by the artificial things. So not only electrical currents, but the subtle body is so delicate that it is influenced a lot simply by your own emotions even. So if you have a lot of negative emotions, like hatred or fear or jealousy or anger, then that whole aura gets really disturbed. And so we see the nice aura turns into a blackish aura with all sorts of clouds in it. So that's the result of negative emotions in a regular person. So your own emotions can affect it also. Yeah. So here we get a whole variety of different patterns in your aura due to different types of emotional problems. It can be like a porcupine with little spikes all over it, or it can be top part can be all like fiery or whatever. You could have claws on it to interfere with other people's auras and grab their energy, etc. It can be all exploding all over the place, whatever. So we get all sorts of subtle bodies. And it interacts with other people also, your aura. And so your anger or your exploitative tendencies, you can grab other people's energy out of their subtle body, etc., and live off other people also. So there's a lot of interaction between the subtle bodies of people, the energy again. So the energy is very subtle, and we don't even notice it, but it's the flow of energy is taking place between individuals at all times as well. So that's why this sangha, or association, is very important and very critical. We have asat sangha, we're ending up with all this energy fight between people, stealing your good energy and putting bad energy all over you, etc. And if you have good satsanga, then we're getting nice, encouraged, our harmonious energy is getting encouraged by that. So we can think of that in asat sangha and satsanga in terms of your energy fields. So, how to cure the imbalances? Now, if you get the electrical fields, it may be very little difficult. We got the cell phones and the 5G, etc., interfering. Maybe a little difficult unless you run away and go to the mountains, where there's no cell phone towers or whatever. But if it's just other people or whatever, or emotional disturbance itself, then you can cure the imbalance by meditation. So if you meditate, we have here on the left-hand side, we have the chakras are all out of place. Your body's all messed up and your chakras are not in line. And if you start meditating, then you start going in line very nicely. So your subtle body can adjust by using your mind properly. Getting rid of the negative things and getting higher frequencies in your brain. So there's different frequencies for different emotions, and if we go, the higher frequencies then are the better ones. So we get the highest ones on peace and light and joy at the top, and we got all the bad ones like guilt and fear and anger at the bottom, giving negative effects. Yeah. So, and also the chakras go at different levels. So we see the top chakra, that's your spiritual one, at the top of the head, that's going at a higher frequency, and the lower one, your Muladhara chakra, is going at a very slow frequency like that. So your chakras also, that's why in Kundalini, the Kundalini snake rises from the lowest chakra to the highest chakra. So it goes from the gross to the subtle. And we can block the energy flow in the chakras by our different mentalities and our emotions, like competition, control, impatience, ego, self-aggrandizement. You get stuck in your belly chakra, your Manipuraka chakra, or guilt, shame, pain, unworthiness, lack, I don't have anything, I'm a victim. Yeah? That's on the Svadhisthana chakra. And the Muladhara chakra, you have sexual depravity, addictions, sexual anxiety, etc., trauma, etc., all on the Muladhara chakra. So if you have all these problems, then the chakras get all blocked up on the lower level, and you can't get any higher. So that means you're in a very tamagun state. Yeah. So if somehow we can get that subtle body working properly, then actually it's very good for spiritual development. And then when that happens, your electrical currents are running very nicely. So that's it, physically and mentally and spiritually, then you can do things very well. So it operates something like a current in your body. And you see here that it's like a toroidal figure, like an electromagnetic field around your body. Okay. So as I said, meditation is a good way to cure that subtle body. Of course, not just a subtle body, because the Atma is there as well. So we just get the physical effects with the subtle body, but it's doing more than that. So if we combine this meditational process or concentration, and we have a positive emotion, the most positive emotion is unconditional love, then we can straighten out our whole system. So that means we concentrate the mind and do bhakti yoga, and we can make the whole subtle body into our harmonious unit. Yeah? But of course, not only physical, mental, we're obviously interested more in the spiritual aspect, because the Atma is the center of everything. If you have the Atma operating properly, then everything else will adjust. So that's what bhakti yoga does. It gets to the Atma, and we develop the unconditional love from there. Yeah? Everything else gets adjusted properly. So for the Atma to get that love, then we have to connect with the Supreme Lord. And that's what the process of bhakti is. Krishna Anusilanam, making a connection with the Lord. So when that happens and the jiva develops nicely, then we can switch to the other world. We get spiritual perception, and we can get into the spiritual world instead of the material world. So as I said, we're perceiving things in this material world because we're covered by ignorance. And we don't even know we're actually stuck in that vision. But we can change our vision. Yeah? We change our vibration rate. And we get to the spiritual level, then we see spiritual world. How do we do that? So we follow the process of bhakti. And raise our vibration until the Atma's doing everything for us. Yeah? And how do we raise the spiritual vibration? Mantra. This is the vibration we use. Yeah? The Maha Mantra is the great sound of deliverance, Prabhupada says. Yeah? This chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is enacted from the spiritual platform, and thus this sound vibration surpasses all lower strata of consciousness, namely sensual, mental, and intellectual. So it's beyond the body, it's beyond the mind, it's beyond the subtle body, because it comes from the Atma in a relationship with Krishna. So it's the highest sound vibration of all. When the superior energy is in contact with inferior energy, it becomes an incompatible situation. So that's our position in the material world. The jiva is covered up by prakriti, the material body, and by ignorance. When the supreme marginal potency, that's the jiva, is in contact with the spiritual potency, hara, radha, it becomes the happy, normal condition of the living entity. So we connect to the spiritual vibration of radha, then we develop our spiritual realization. The three words, namely Hara, Krishna, and Rama, are transcendental seeds of the Maha Mantra, and the chanting is a spiritual call for the Lord and his internal energy, Hara, for giving protection to the conditioned soul. So this is how we can raise our energy to the highest spiritual vibration. No other means, therefore, of spiritual realization is as effective in this age as chanting the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, that's it. Okay. Any questions?
Mm-hmm. So earlier on in the slideshow, you had a depiction of different gunas creating different qualities in us. Mm-hmm. And my understanding was intelligence is higher than the mind.
Okay.
But in that one, it was showing how the
mind is in sattva and intelligence is in rajas. Yeah, that's a common question. In the Bhagavad Gita, we find it in chapter 2, Krishna says the mind, and higher than the mind is intelligence, higher than the intelligence is the Atma, like that. So if intelligence is used properly, that is under the guidance of Paramatma and Scripture and Guru, then of course it's higher. But if not, it becomes the slave of the mind. Then it acts in a very rajasic way, simply to fulfill the mind. The mind, on the other hand, as I said, could be positive or negative depending on how we use it. So it has a possibility of delivering us as well. So that's why it's considered sattva. But of course, it can also go into rajasic mode as well and tamasic mode, depending on how we use it. So both are, we can say, they can go either way. So the mind can go into tamasic or rajasic states, and the intelligence also, if it is in conjunction with Paramatma and spiritual knowledge, then it can guide the mind. We can say at that stage it becomes spiritual intelligence, actually. Then it's useful. When it's material intelligence, then it's a slave of the mind to fulfill material desires. Yeah.
One slide in the, I think that was that the demigods are doing that as a service out of love for Krishna. But in that,
out of fear. Well, that's more or less the poetic description from the Upanishads to show that ultimately everybody has to obey the Supreme Lord, including the Devatas. So they're obviously dasa, so whatever the Lord says they have to do, in that sense, fear. Not that they're simply frightened, but they're also, devotees, but nevertheless, they're under the authority of the Lord. So, in other words, He's the controller, they're the servant. So everybody has to obey Him. All the elements obey Him, all the Devatas obey Him.
goal is knowing the Supreme Soul and the Atma is the goal you were saying, and everything else becomes aligned. But we also see that from this morning's class, we mentioned because we have a physical body, that it may appear like a common thing that we also have a accident or have cancer and things like that. So even though the goal we are practicing Krishna consciousness, then sometimes everything doesn't get aligned with the material thing.
So what's the question?
I was a bit confused on that. You're mentioning if we align with the Atma, then everything else is realigned.
Oh, yeah. So, of course, if we're doing sadhana bhakti, so the principle is, I am the servant of Krishna, and ultimately it's the jiva, the relationship with the jiva and the Supreme Lord. We're not trying to relate our body to it, but we use our body in the service of the Lord. So the jiva, as a jiva, we're using our body to serve the Lord. But actually it's the jiva's relationship with the Lord. And when we perfect that relationship, we give up the material body and attain the Lord. However, because we're doing sadhana, then we got anarthas, we got ahankara, etc. we have to deal with. So this covers our perception to some degree. So it's not 100% clear, and it may interfere with it and cause interruptions so that sometimes we can't do devotional service, we get involved with material things again. So that's a stage of unsteadiness or anishita bhakti. But as we advance, then gradually the anartha is clear, and then we can more steadily do the service, and eventually everything disappears, all the obstacles and ignorance disappear, and then we can, when that's perfected, we call that prema. So it's a gradual process of getting to that perfect state.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Yeah, I was just thinking about the soul body and the immune system. Wim Hof.
No, Wim Hof, yeah.
So he's got everybody around the world sat in baths of ice.
Yeah.
But now he's related on that a little bit and saying that a cold shower is just as good for
immunity.
Yeah. And Prabhupada is that spiritual, and then somebody also told me that a cold shower will clean the soul body.
Oh, yeah. Water is very sacred in the Vedic literature. It's, the Vedas are obsessed with water and cleanliness. And we see even in deity worship, cleanliness. You got to keep washing your hands all the time and whatever. You got to clean clothes. You got to take a bath and like that. And we'll find even in archaeologically speaking, and when they discovered those places, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, the Indus civilization. The remarkable thing was they had a lot of bath places. Everyone was taking bath there also. So water was, a part of the ritual of cleanliness. So one reason, of course, is physical cleanliness, and get rid of all the germs and whatever like that. The other is that it also is, it purifies your aura, so to speak, your subtle body as well, especially the cold water. So that's why the cold water is usually advised over the hot water, because it actually purifies your aura as well. So therefore, when you get up in the morning, you're supposed to take the bath, and that actually not only purifies you of dirt, but also all your bad dreams and all that stuff in your aura gets also purified out also. So it acts on the physical level, gross physical level, and on the subtle level as well. Of course, it make it a little spiritual also, but then you can call Ganga into the water and it becomes spiritual. So we get a spiritual about this as well.
This question may be going into the realm of the unknown, but I will ask it anyway. It's just like we're talking about material elements. So there is a connection there, of course, with the senses. Like, first of all, it's, you know, like the sense of hearing and touch and taste and whatever.
Yeah.
And so we have the working senses, like with the realm of touch, or particularly taste, we have the tongue. And then, of course, they're related to the gross elements, like earth, air, fire, water, and air. So therefore, in the mortal world, us mortals here are born in mortal bodies of earth, air, fire, water, which is blood, bone, pus, mucus, etc. So this is how our working senses work. But we're here, as we go up this universe, we get into more subtle bodies which really don't have these gross material senses. So, you know, the question begs the question that if they don't have the gross material senses, how would they be able to taste anything?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, they have gross and subtle bodies. They don't get rid of those, but their gross body is much subtler than our body, because the combination of elements is different. So we have I think water and earth, that's our main components. And they say the Devata body is all water, very little earth. So therefore we can't even see that body, and they can exist in another planet with different vibration or whatever, we can't even see them. And so probably you get the Brahma's body, it's Mahatattva or something like that, but it's still a material element, but very, very subtle. So they all have their senses, and they all have their subtle body and gross body, but in that way they have their perceptions, but they're much finer in what they can perceive, and their enjoyments are also finer.
Hare Krishna. Questions from someone on the radio. Sometimes meditation suppresses the creativity, expression, and pacifies the mind so much that there's no passion to create anything. As a creative person, I find meditation dulls the process by removing passion. How do I balance this?
What's the question?
I'm just reading from the...
Can you explain what it means?
I think they're saying that the meditation, they're meditating, they're chanting, and it's dulling their creativity.
Oh, dulling their creativity. Yeah. Oh, well, I think we're probably doing it wrong. So if you meditate properly, then it should increase everything. Health, creativity, happiness, peace, and of course spiritual realization. That's what it should do. Everything positive should result, not the negative. So probably something wrong in the technique. That is why in yoga, generally, in the higher, when you go higher than just asanas and you go into pranayama and meditation, they say you have to do it through a guru. If you don't do it through the guru, you end up with mental problems. Your nervous system can get really messed up by doing the pranayama the wrong way and meditating in the wrong way, and you can end up with mental problems. Same in China. They do qigong, which is like yoga, and it got very popular in the modern world, but then they had to build a special hospital for the people, a mental hospital for the qigong people that went crazy because they weren't doing it properly, and then they ended up with mental problems, so they have a special hospital for them. So, you know, it's a very, very particular how you meditate and whatever. You have to do it very carefully, otherwise you can get mental problems. But fortunately, and they say, like with the chakras and kundalini, the same thing. That's the problem with kundalini. It can be very dangerous if you prematurely open your chakras or whatever. Then you can get with the mental problems and stuff, and your subtle body gets all disturbed. So then they say the safest thing is just to stimulate your heart chakra with unconditional love, and that opens everything up. So then we do bhakti, and that solves all the problems. It's safer, much safer than the other methods. So we do meditation with bhakti, then that's safe.
I was just we were talking about how different things affect your system, and there's a lot of people on around the world who are advertising these shields.
Protective things. Protective shields, and amulets, and so many things. Yeah. I don't know. They can, definitely they can. Similarly, we have spiritually, we have these, what your kavachas, you stick on your arm or whatever like this, Nrsinga kavacha or whatever, or a Garuda pendant or whatever like that. So they also have energy, of course, spiritual energy in them as well. So on the material level, of course, there's things for protecting yourself from electromagnetic energy and stuff. They have different things you can use for that. They probably work. I don't know how we can test them, but probably some of them do work nicely to protect you from the electromagnetic fields, at least that much.
Coming down the universes, the innumerable universes.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking if we divide 4,320,000,000 years by 125, then can we get the number of universes in this material? Because if Krishna has got this eternal roadshow and he's staying 125 years. By the time he gets back here,
well, possibly you could, but then he may have, in different universes, he may have different leelas, so he may spend different number of years also. Some longer maybe and some shorter. So we can't really say, but that's maybe a way of explaining it, but maybe he's not subject to that logic either.
No, it's about 70 million.
Yeah.
70 million.
Yeah.
He's done 125 years.
Yeah. Of course, see, it's not even that, because he can actually, every second, he can go to a different universe, and simultaneously he can have staggered leelas. In other words, he's born here, and then the next moment he's born in another universe, and another universe, and another universe. So the birth also is eternal, eternally going on in all different universes. So birth itself is eternal within the material world. He's going on all the time like that. So it's not necessarily he has to go for 125 years, then go to another universe. He can go the next second, and the next second, and the next second, and the next second. So if you count the number of seconds up, of course he could go every half second also, so it's infinite then. The number of universes would be infinite. Okay, Hare Krishna.